of despair. The term refers to an increase in deaths from such causes as suicide, drug use disorders, and alcoholic liver disease, which are often connected with economic hardship, depression, and stress. While rates of death from drug overdose and homicide have climbed for both women and men, it is clear that men constitute an increasingly disproportionate share of these deaths. And a lot of the literature around this, and I'll be honest that this is kind of near and dear to my heart as a man who has two young sons and who has been doing ministry for 25 years, obviously to men and women, but because I'm a man, I feel a unique connection to the plight of young men. And so I've been reading about this and studying about this a lot, and a lot of the literature points to a lack of purpose, a lack of mission, a lack of clear identity among young men in particular that is contributing to these higher rates of overdose and depression and increases in stress that have caused a widening gap in the mortality rate between men and women. A Harvard study says that the results of the study show that people with the highest sense of purpose indicated the lowest risk of death, a 15.2% all-cause mortality risk, compared to people with the lowest sense of purpose who had a 36% chance of a mortality rate, which is a 20% difference, which is a gigantic difference. Anytime you're dealing with data, usually 5 to 10 data points are a massive difference. A 20% difference between the people with the highest and lowest senses of purpose and how that connects to their likelihood of mortality is a really significant impact on our life. And so I think in particular, this is a moment where we can pause and pay attention to the challenges that all of our society are facing around purpose. Now, there's a lot of discussion in our pop culture around this issue and a lot of people trying to solve this problem. I mean, every yoga studio you drive by has your purpose in mind, and it's all across the side of there. I didn't know. I thought it was stretching. It's actually purpose. And so this is, there are a lot of influencers and everybody is trying to solve this problem, and young men and young women in particular are looking to the world to answer this question of why am I here and what am I for? And the problem when we ask questions of the world is that we will get answers from the world. And so you see this rise, especially young men, this rise in the popularity of men like Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate and others, and a similar rise with different names that I know less among young women, but many podcasts like Call Her Daddy and others that I cannot recommend at any level, but are trying to answer these questions for young men and young women to say, what are you here for? Why do you exist? What is your purpose? What is your mission? And the answers that these people are giving are not great answers. They are worldly, shallow answers that like wealth and success and image and beauty and popularity and accomplishment. And if you're a young man, that accomplishing the gathering of young women to you is the answer to this question, according to some of these guys. And so there is a really serious epidemic happening right now, which is a lack of purpose, a lack of mission, and a desire to find that and coming up with bad answers. In fact, even the Harvard Business Review got into the game, and they give you 3 steps. I read an article, 3 steps to find your purpose. It says, seek out new experiences and reach beyond yourself. That's 1, not bad. Number 2, reflect on your experiences after you've reached out and reached beyond yourself. And then 3, discuss your life goals and gather feedback from your friends. That's how you find your purpose. That's terrible. Like that is such a shallow approach to such a serious question. And so I want to add a 4th to that. And I'm no Harvard grad, but my 4th is read your Bible. And I don't mean that in like a pastory kind of way. I mean that specifically, that's what we're doing Jonah for. Because in Jonah, I think we can find a path to understanding what our purpose is and what our mission is. And encourage all of you to really take this seriously, no matter where you're at, no matter if you are 12 years old or lot more than that. I was going to give a high age, and I thought, there's going to be people even higher than that in here, and they're going to be offended and whatever. So whether you're 12 or 212, I think that pretty much, that's everybody. I think it's important that we take this question seriously. What am I here for? What is my mission that I have been given? Because I think without it, we start to reach and grab for things that are temporal, that are shallow, that fade the moment we catch them, and are simply just not worth our time. So I want to go to Jonah, chapter 1. We're going to do 2 verses today. We're going to do kind of some big themes today to establish this, and we'll get into the story for the rest of our time. So it says, "Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, 'Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me.'" So Jonah is a prophet. Okay, he's a prophet of God. This is not his only mission. It's not the only time that he even shows up in the Bible. He has been a prophet of God. God comes to Jonah, as he has probably dozens of times before, and says, "Hey, I've got a mission for you. I need you to go to Nineveh, and I need you to preach the gospel to them because their evil has come up before me, and we need to deal with that," right? Now, we're going to get into all of what happens here in the next 4 or 5 weeks, but let me just say this at the beginning. Jonah has a profession, so to speak, in the sense that he is a prophet, and this is just kind of his next mission. But this is a significant story in the sense that basically he is being told, go to your worst enemy and preach the gospel to them. Okay, so Nineveh is this powerful city that is an enemy of the Jews, that they are in constant conflict with one another, and they would think, gosh, I would never step foot in Nineveh, let alone go there for its good to preach the gospel to it and to try to reach it. This is terrible. This is an Angelino being sent to San Francisco. This is, the illustrations write themselves, but this is a terrible mission that God has just given Jonah, and we're going to see kind of how he responds to it. But what I want us to see here is that the word of the Lord came to Jonah and said, "Go do this. This is your mission." Which, when I read that, I go, man, that would be nice. Wouldn't that be nice if we woke up one morning and God goes, "Hey, go to San Bernardino. I've got something for you to do." Right? Go do this thing, and we have the audible voice of God. It'd be pretty nice to have that kind of clarity. Thankfully, we do. It's in the Bible. So we're gonna do that in a couple of different ways. I want to pause real quick to just address Jonah as a book, because you're gonna see in the coming weeks it's crazy. Right? He gets swallowed up by a whale, lives in a big fish, I don't know, and is in there for 3 days and then gets spit out in Nineveh. That's going to happen. And there's going to be some of us who go, come on, are we believing this? Like, are we all, like, you're going to start looking around and be like, am I the only one who thinks this is crazy? No, I think it's crazy. And so the question is, what is this? Is it a parable? Is it mythology? Is it history? What is it? How do we deal with it? I am going to get into that in much more detail in the future, but I want to just kind of seed the conversation with 2 passages. 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 25 says, "He restored the border of Israel from Lebo Hamath as far as the Sea of Arabah, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, who was from Gath Hepher." So this is a different mission that God had sent Jonah on that's recorded in 2 Kings. So there's not really a question whether Jonah is like a made-up guy and this is just purely a parable like the parables Jesus tells that aren't really specific. This is at least clearly a guy, right? Jonah was an actual guy. Jesus then addresses this in Matthew chapter 12. Says, "Then some of the scribes and Pharisees answered him, saying, 'Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you.' But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except for the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here." So at least when Jesus talks about it in Matthew chapter 12, he refers to it as a real thing. He goes, hey, remember the Jonah story? Something like that's going to happen. And so there's a little bit of a challenge if we just want to make it a parable and mythology or an allegory, because Jesus is saying, I'm going to do the same thing that Jonah did. The same way Jonah was in the fish for 3 days, the Son of Man's going to, it's kind of a prophecy of his death and resurrection. And so if we take Jonah as pure allegory and mythology, it does challenge us around the historicity of Jesus' death and resurrection as well. So just leave that there. We are going to deal with this directly next week, so just hang with me for one more week, okay? Here's what I want to do. I want to do a biblical theology of mission this morning. And I know that sounds impressive, and I mean for it to. I want to give us 3 kind of tent poles in the scriptures. We're going to start in Genesis chapter 1. We're going to end at the end of the Gospel of Matthew. And what I want to do is give us 3 big, important passages. And I want us to see how they kind of weaved together gives us our mission. Now, I don't typically like to preach this way. I like to have a passage and just kind of teach my way through it. But every once in a while, we got to take a step back and see what God is doing in the most macro sense in order to be able to kind of find ourselves in the micro. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do. I hope you track with me. Turn to Genesis chapter 1. You're going to find that on page 1 in your Bibles. As you're turning there, I want to paint kind of a big picture. So there's 2 ways in which we might talk about the gospel, okay? And so if you're new, the gospel is the good news. The Greek evangelion just means the good news. The good news that the Bible talks about, we can talk about it kind of in 2 ways. One is there's good news that there is a grand story to the world, and that's going to be important today. And then the climax of that story, the climax of the gospel is Jesus' death and resurrection and what that means for us. That's what we celebrated last weekend. What I want to talk about today is kind of the grand story, the big picture of the gospel, which we would describe as creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. Okay, and so this arc that starts in Genesis and ends in Revelation says God created all things on purpose with intentionality and out of love and out of an expression of his being, that God didn't need anything, God wasn't lacking something and needed to fill some void in his life like why we date each other. Like he just had an artistic expression, an expression of his love and creative work, and made the universe. Creation. There's purpose, there's meaning, there's love, there's relationship, because God created it so. That lasted for like 15 minutes, and we get to Genesis chapter 3, and it breaks. Right? Sin enters the world, rebellion enters the world because Adam and Eve wanted to be like God instead of serving God and being in relationship with God. They wanted to be God, and so it all breaks. We have this long gap between Genesis chapter 3 and the advent of Jesus, his birth, life, death, and resurrection, which is redemption, that there is hope that what has been happening, all of this sin that has happened, will be redeemed in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And then lastly, and this is important, that there will be a restoration, okay? Some of us, I think, and I'll say this for me, I grew up thinking that the story of the Bible was creation, fall, redemption, God's going to blow it all up and start over. That's not the story. That's not That's not what it says at all. In fact, the story of the gospel is something of a circle, that there is creation and there is fall and there's redemption, but the promise of restoration is not that it's all going to burn up and go away and explode and God's going to create a new thing, but that he is going to ultimately restore his intention in creation. That what he designed cannot be corrupted to such a degree that he has to just blow it up and start over, but that God, in his redemptive grace, can actually redeem and make new again what his original intention in creation was. Okay, so this is a really important idea at a couple of levels. One, it frames up God's work in the world for us, right? So God's redemptive and restorative work is always pointing two directions. One, to what he will ultimately do, and two, to what he did in the first place. So as we stand in the middle, kind of between redemption and restoration, we are seeing things being redeemed. We see our lives being redeemed. We see relationships being redeemed, but not fully restored. There's still brokenness. There's still sin. So we see these little pictures, these little windows of what God created us for and what he will one day restore us to. And we kind of live in between those moments. Right? That's really important, because if the end is simply destruction and God's going to blow it all up and start over, then that redemptive work is a kind of a short-term Band-Aid kind of work. It doesn't point forward to anything. But that's not what the story tells us. The story of the scripture, and you think about these little things you start to pick up as you read the scriptures this way. All of the words about God's work start with R-E, right? Renew, redeem, resurrection, right? So it all tells us a story of he is going to undo what has been done and return it back to what his initial intention is. Another reason why this is really important is if God created in such a way and Satan disrupted and contaminated it to such a degree that he has to blow it up, who wins in that story? I mean, Satan, to some degree, right? That his work was so powerful that God couldn't redeem it and restore it back to what was. But that's not the story. The story is there is no evil, no depth of destruction so bad that God cannot reach it by grace. That's true for us, and it's true for his creation. And that's good news. It's good news for me. It's good news for you. And it's good news for all of God's creation. So that's the big picture of this, right? Within this, we see in Genesis chapter 1, God has created all things, and he gets to verse 28. And it says, God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. This is the first command of God in the scriptures. This is the mission that God gives to humanity. He has created Adam and Eve, and he says to them, here's the plan, guys. Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea. This is what theologians call the cultural mandate, right? This is God's big picture vision before sin. So sin has not been corrupted. There's nothing that needs to be redeemed. There's nothing that needs to be restored. This is in God's perfect creation. He goes, here's what I want you to do. Fill the earth. It's the first and greatest commandment. Be fruitful and multiply. For everyone who's married, we say, okay. For everyone who's married, we say, man, okay, we're going to do a marriage series next. Be fruitful and multiply is like the best part, you guys. Nancy Pearcey in her book, Total Truth, says this. She goes, the first phrase, be fruitful and multiply, means to develop the social world, build families, churches, schools, cities, governments, laws. The second phrase, subdue the earth, means to harness the natural world, plant crops, build bridges, design computers, compose music. This passage is sometimes called the cultural mandate because it tells us that our original purpose was to create cultures, build civilizations, nothing less. Okay? This is really important. If we're going to hang together for the next 70 years, you're going to hear about this a lot. Because this is why God put us on the earth. To build, to create, to cultivate. He gave us all the natural resources we might need, and he goes, go crazy. Build a world. Build families. Be fruitful and multiply. Build families. Have kids. Give those kids in marriage. Let them have kids. Let's fill this whole earth. He goes, and have dominion over it. Not domination, dominion. This cultivation, this caring cultivation to take the things that God has created and given us, and make them more and make them better. Right? So the essential work of Genesis 1:28 is take thing one and thing two, figure out how to put them together to create thing three. That's the cultural mandate. And it's what you all have been doing in your work life for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, some of you, to make things and to accomplish the cultural mandate that God gave us at the very beginning of this. Now, here's why I think this is really cool and exciting. Because when you are done working, when you retire, if you retire, there is not a single activity that has taken up more of your time, including sleep, than your work. And what is the very first commandment in the Bible? Work in such a way that cultivates God's world. That's unbelievable. Because it just infused meaning into the thing that God gave you to do for the vast majority of your life. You are not just working a job. You are not just teaching. You are not just doing real estate. You're not just doing finance. You're not just operating on people. You're not just whatever. You are cultivating God's world. So some of you are maybe in technology. Think about this. I love this idea. I heard somebody else say it, and it just blew me away. Silicon. 27.5% of the Earth's crust is silicon. It's the second most common element in the Earth's crust after oxygen. And in however many years since this cultural mandate was given, we have gone from this raw material that it makes up a quarter of the Earth's crust to taking that raw material over years and years and years and years and years, turning that into iPhones. Those silicon chips, God gave us the raw materials in his creation and go, you'll figure it out eventually. It's going to be crazy. It's going to ruin everything, but it's going to be crazy. You're going to take this rock, this element, I think it's the 14th element on the chart, if I remember correctly, and you're going to turn it into such wild virtual reality technology, your ancestors will not even believe it. That's cultivation. That's taking thing one and thing two and creating thing three, and then taking thing three with thing four and creating thing six. And then thousands of years down the road, you have tablets and iPhones and VR and all the stuff that silicon has brought us. It's unbelievable. Andy Crouch, who's one of my favorite writers, wrote a book called Culture Making, and in it he says this: I wonder what we Christians are known for in the world outside our churches. Are we known as critics, consumers, copiers, condemners of culture? I'm afraid so. Why aren't we known as cultivators? People who tend and nourish what is best in human culture, who do the hard and painstaking work to preserve the best of what people before us have done. Why aren't we known as creators? People who dare to think and do something that has never been thought of or done before. Something that makes the world more welcoming and thrilling and beautiful. And to be sure, we do. We are. We could go around this room and tell stories of ways we have cultivated in the spirit of Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. But man, why isn't that our passion as a people? That we would see these things. I mean, think about it. This is just one implication that I just personally love. Someday we're going to do a series on heaven because it's amazing. Heaven's going to be great. Think about this. God creates all things perfect. He gives us this cultural mandate to say, hey, take all my creation and make stuff. Make families, make cities, make civilizations, make technology, make stuff. Cultivate the world into being something that glorifies me and helps the common good. So he goes, listen, this is what I want you to do. We're going to do it. We have done it, but it's all been tinged by sin, right? Jesus comes, redeems that so that we can now work that original mission, but in a redemptive way towards a restorative end. So here's what I think. I think that there is some work that we are going to do. There are some things that we are going to create that are so fully embracing Jesus' cultural mandate, his mission to us, that when we get to heaven, they're going to be there. It's going to be there. Some of the things we create. We think of heaven as clouds and angels and harps, and that sounds terrible. That's why most of us don't long for heaven. Heaven is going to be civilization stripped of all its evil. So heaven is going to be what God told us to do, but having removed all of what makes it painful and hard and sad and destructive. So, read Revelation. It's a city. It's not a cloud city. It's got streets of gold. There's jewels everywhere. Sounds great. But some of what we build is going to be there too. The languages we build, the technology that we build, the things that we have, the songs that we've written is going to be in heaven with us because it accomplishes God's command, his first command to cultivate the earth. And to the degree that we have obeyed that, obviously not fully, obviously every single thing we do and say is tinged with sin in some ways, and God will redeem that by pulling all that out. That's the fire of Revelation. It's a refining fire, not a destroying fire. So that stuff gets taken out. That's what we live with for eternity in heaven. That sounds pretty good, right? I have this all the time. This will happen to me. This is not in my notes. It's a waste of time, but it's fine. Where I see where people go, and I go, oh, that place looks amazing. I want to go there. And I just think, I'll never be able to afford that. But in heaven, I'm gonna get to go where you guys go for eternity. And it won't cost me a dime. But I think about that because the world as God created it is the world that he is going to restore. It's not some other place. It's the redeemed and restored version of what he has created in the first place. Okay, so this is our first tent pole. This is our first idea in our biblical theology of mission. God's given you a mission. He gave all of humanity a mission in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. Your mission is fill the earth, subdue it, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over it, cultivate and create using the raw materials of God's world. That's your mission. That's the big picture mission of all of humanity, right? Now our job then is to find our place in it, our specific way in which we go, hey, my brain can accomplish this. You go do the silicon thing. I couldn't tell you, I couldn't identify silicon if I had two options. That is not my world at all, but it's somebody's. Every one of us has interests and skills and experience and all these things that contribute to this cultivating work. Okay? But we have to see that work in view of God's overarching mission to us. So that's number one. Number two, turn to Matthew. Matthew 22. It's page 828 in my Bible, but I don't think that's going to be helpful. Matthew 22, verse 34. It says, but when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all of the law and the prophets. Now, this passage is what we call the Great Commandment, the greatest commandment and the second greatest commandment. Jesus says, the Jews try to kind of trap him. What is the one great commandment? He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And a second is like it, which is not what they asked for. But he said, a second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. this speaks to our internal motivation for doing things. I don't have time to get too far into this passage, but it is interesting to think about Jesus commanding love, right? We think of love as kind of just a purely emotional reaction that has to come organically, and Jesus goes, no, choose to love. I'm commanding you to love, so you respond in obedience to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So this speaks to our internal motivation for accomplishing God's mission, right? So God gives us a mission: care for, cultivate, create. We have our specific applications of that given our lives. Then Jesus goes, okay, but do so out of a deep love for God and a love for your neighbor, which is a different kind of motivation than a motivation of success, right? So we have the story of the Tower of Babel, which is the people saying we want to make a name for ourselves, we want to be famous, and so we're going to accomplish this great technological work. I mean, that's the amazing thing, is they took the raw materials that God had given them, and they created a tower that was unprecedented at the time. But God goes, no. But you did it because you wanted to be famous. You did it because you wanted to make a name for yourself. That's not why we do this. God created out of his character, out of love, out of purpose and intentionality, creates the whole world. And he goes, yeah, do it for that reason. Jesus corrects us here and goes, it's not about success. It's not about freedom or security that finances would bring us. Like, money cannot be the purpose. Money is an important tool and it's valuable, but it's a tool, not an end. When money becomes an end, it becomes a problem. But it's a fantastic tool. It's a fantastic means. The question is, why? Why are you trying to do this? Jesus says, one, it ought to be love for God and a desire to glorify him. So we might ask ourselves, and most of you are at least in the middle, if not well into your career, you may ask yourself, like, how can I glorify God through my work? And I don't know if that's a question you've ever asked yourself. To specifically go, not how can I glorify God by being an honest and hardworking employee that shows up on time. That's great. You should definitely do that. That's the minimum, though. The challenge and the exciting part goes, how can I do work such that the work itself glorifies God? Now, does that mean you can only do Christian real estate or do Christian finance or I don't even know what that means. And it sounds terrible, right? I don't know what that means. But what you can say is, I am going to pursue means and ends that are in line with the gospel story. So God goes, I want to create things out of love and intentionality and purpose so that you can cultivate more and build civilization and make this world great. And you go, okay, I could do that in finance. I could do that in law. I could do that in my medical profession. The way in which, doctors, this is the most obvious application of this. You are literally healing the effects of the fall. Do you think about it that way? When you stand before a patient, do you go, you are sick because of Adam and Eve's sin, and I get to do this small part, cultivating and creating, like putting thing one with thing two, and thing three is a stethoscope, and I'm going to put it on your chest, and I'm going to hear your heart, and that is me accomplishing God's creative work and his mandate to us to bring about a redeeming moment and undo, roll back to some degree, the effects of sin in this person's life. That's amazing. We should probably all go be doctors. That's unbelievable. Or if you are in finance, can you create models? Can you create products? Can you work in such a way that actually works towards the greater good of the people around you and so gives glory to God by saying, no, I will not pursue this. Yes, I will pursue this because this is not in line with the work of the gospel, and this is, and I'm going to choose the work I take on. I'm going to choose the products I sell. I'm going to choose the way I talk about these things that honor God and who he is and what his intention was in this. Can I make those choices? Yeah. And so we talk about, Jesus talks about the need for us to love God in all of this, in all of our work, and to glorify him. And I know, just take a quick second on this. Sometimes the idea of like we need to glorify God and make God famous seems like God might be a narcissist, and why is he so obsessed with his own glory? Here's why. God is the only person or the only thing that as he gets more famous, we get better. As he gets more known, the world gets better. Every other person, every other thing, as it gets more famous, it gets better. It gets the benefit of its own fame. God is the only one that the more people know him, the more people are changed by him, helped by him, transformed by him. So glorifying him and making him famous is one of the most loving things that we could do to the people around us, which is the second thing. Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. 2, love your neighbor as yourself. So again, with our work, we might ask ourselves, and I mean work in the broadest sense of your career, if you are a homemaker, if you are a mother or a father, all of the things that we put our hands to are this expression of God's work in our lives. He says we ought to love God in our work and love our neighbor. So we might just ask, like, how does my work demonstrate genuine love for my neighbor? How can I work not just in such a way like ethically, that's good and important, but also how can the work that I do work towards the good of the people around me? You go, well, who's my neighbor? I mean, it's at least your neighbor. Like, just to think of a person that you have in mind to go, how could my work be to the benefit of the people around me? I know that sounds simple, but Jesus says the second most important commandment, that we would love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And so with everything that we do, and namely this cultivating work that God's given us, that we might ask ourselves those 2 kind of internal motivation questions to go, 1, am I doing this for the glory of God? And if not, how could I? How can my work make God more famous? And 2, how can my work be for the good of people around me? And not just in kind of a trickle-down economics, I'm making the world better. No, but like challenge yourself to think, how can my work directly, how can I as a manager care for the people that I am managing in such a way that doesn't just make them more effective, but makes them more good, more godly, more filled with grace? How can I demonstrate the love of God for them on a daily basis in my one-on-ones with them, in our staff meetings, and whatever your context is? I know you do 100 different jobs. You're going to have to do the work of applying, because I can't apply it to everybody's life, but to figure out, like, there are so many people that you touch in your work. How can your work itself glorify God and be for the good of people around you? Lastly, just a couple pages over, Matthew 28. Matthew chapter 28. This is after the death and resurrection of Jesus. He's appeared to them a number of times. Verse 16 says, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. So, often, I think if you have grown up in church, you hear the Great Commission as a call to go and make disciples of Jesus, to share your faith and to help people grow in their faith as they come to faith. And that is absolutely the case. That is absolutely what Jesus is calling us to do. The question is, what is that faith? What is that calling that you are helping people walk in? Is it purely a kind of climax of the story gospel where it's just you are a sinner in need of grace, believe in Jesus so that you can go to heaven? 100%. That is the climax of the story. That is the big so what. But it's also just like 5 minutes of the movie. What we're calling people into is this Genesis to Revelation gospel, of which the cross and resurrection are the climax. There's no question, so I don't want to minimize those things. But we minimize them when we don't put them in the context of the whole. So when Jesus says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you, he goes, start in Genesis. Start in Genesis with, you were created for a purpose. You were created with a mission. And you were created with a very specific mission to cultivate and create and to care for God's creation, to build civilizations, to build things that glorify God and love people. That's what you were called into. And that we are empowered by the cross and the resurrection, the Holy Spirit, the grace that is poured out from that. And we live in hope of one day God restoring all things back to who they are, or to what his creative work was. And so when Jesus says, go and make disciples of all nations, he's saying no less than this, but he's also going, but it's all of this. Go and make disciples, the kinds of people who understand they were made for a purpose. They were given a mission. They were given internal motivation for that mission. They are empowered by the gospel, by grace for that mission, and that mission actually has an eternal consequence. That's what it means to be a disciple. That's what it means to go and make people who do that. Not just prayer at a given moment and try to be better as a result of it, but people who go, I was made for a purpose. God gave me a mission. It's been broken and infused with sin, but Jesus is redeeming that, and I know that there is good work that I will do that will last for eternity. And that's a way better story. That's a way better story than any of these other influencers and people are pitching to young men and women and old men and women as well. About wealth and success and image and beauty, and all of these things are just so, they sound so meaningless and shallow compared to this grand vision of God coming to you and going, go make the world. Like, go make the world. Take things that don't exist, make them exist. Like in a way, God has empowered us to walk out his creative work. He's going, I'm just going to give you the crayons. You create the art. I'm going to give you all the raw materials. Go make cool things. That's the cultural man. It's literally the first thing God gives us to do. Go make the world great. Go make amazing things. The kinds of things that glorify me, love your fellow neighbor, and will last for eternity. That's your mission. So the question is, what's your part in it? Because your part's not my part part's not your part. My part's just tell you to do your part. That's my part. I'm doing my part right now. Go do your part. So the question is, what is your part? How will you take the gifts and the skills, the time, the energy, the resources, everything God's given you, and to do it in such a way that glorifies him and is for the good of your neighbor, that it accomplishes God's mission and might, in fact, last into eternity? I mean, I love that idea, that an architect could build a building to the glory of God and for the good of his neighbor, and that God would, after removing whatever elements of decay and rot may exist because of our fallen creation, that it may last forever. And that a thousands years from now, we could still use that building. We could still preach in a room like this. That's amazing. That's amazing to think of. And I got to be honest, that's your mission. It's not complicated. Your mission, your purpose in life, it's not given to you to create your purpose. Your purpose has been given. Yours is just to discover. Just to discover what is the specific application. How can you cultivate the world for God's glory and your neighbor's good in such a way that they will join you on this mission? That's that evangelistic part. But I will say this, none of this is possible without the truth of the gospel. If creation, fall, redemption, restoration, if God's, Jesus' life, death, and resurrection are not true, then this is all pointless. In fact, I would argue that when people who are not people of faith, atheist, agnostic, materialist kind of folks, talk about the idea of purpose, it's illogical. It's wishing upon a star. It's wishing something existed that you have claimed doesn't exist. If there is no kind of meta sense of purpose, if there's nothing greater than just the tangible world, then you don't have purpose. You cannot have purpose. By definition, you are random. You are meaningless. And so this idea of people, these purveyors of purpose that exist on the internet these days, who have an atheistic or materialist presupposition, like they're just selling you lies. They're selling you lies and hoping you will buy it and they can make some money in the short term and laugh themselves to the grave. Because it's all fake. It doesn't even make sense by their own logic. The only way this makes sense is because of Jesus' creative, sustaining, and empowering work. That's it. You have purpose because Jesus gave you purpose. You can accomplish that purpose because Jesus lived a perfect life, died, and was raised again. That's the only way. And the only way that your work today will have any meaning beyond the moment, any meaning, and certainly into eternity, is because Jesus will make it so. He will return. He will restore. And we do have a future. Otherwise, what are we doing? I mean, honestly, sometimes I see people who are avowed atheists and they're telling me to do good and be good. And I go, why? You're wasting your time. You're wasting your time. Like, if you're an atheist, don't do good. Why? Go get out of this life whatever you can. Cheat, steal, kill. If you can get away with it, get away with it, because why not? This gives us meaning. This gives us purpose. And it's our job simply to walk out these doors, wake up in the morning on Monday morning, and go to whatever job that we have and go, how can I glorify God today? How can I love my neighbor today? How can I cultivate and create and care for the things that God has given me? And how could I accomplish something that will last into eternity? That's a great goal. You want to make $1 million or $10 million or whatever your goals are in life. How about create something that lasts forever? That so accomplishes God's work that it lasts into eternity. That's what's on offer to us. And man, that's good news. Let's pray. Jesus, you, man, it's such a gift what you've given us. That you made us with intentionality, that every ounce of our being, every second of our existence was given to us as a gift. That you didn't just create kind of this playground for us to enjoy like a perennial vacation, but you gave us a mission because we need a mission. You wired us to have a mission. You wired us to have purpose. And you gave us one right off the bat. You created this unbelievable world with this rich natural resources and said, go crazy. Make an amazing world. Be creative. Build on each other's ideas. Take one creative idea and combine it with another one and make a whole new thing. Do it to my glory and for the good of your neighbor. And when we do that, we get to participate in your creative and restoring work. So God, I pray, and it's hard for us to do, but for us to wake up every morning as we drive into work, whatever we are to do, that we would ask, hey, Lord, how can I today bring glory to you? Not just in my behavior and demeanor and the words that I choose, it's just super important. But also, like, what could I create today? What could I make today? What could I fix today? What could I solve today that would glorify you and love my neighbor? And then, Lord, give us, by your Spirit, give us the minds, the hearts, the wills to go get it done and to celebrate. Celebrate the way you've made us, the minds you've given us, the hands you've given us, the hearts that can actually accomplish all this for your glory and for our good.